Okay, welcome to another motion breakdown video where today we'll be doing government side on the McGill IV Route 2 motion. This motion is a bit interesting because there are multiple scenarios that could play within the round itself. So a lot of the analysis that you're going to hear is going to be very scenario based. Which is a bit tricky for, like, let's say, newer intermediary debaters to follow, but it is important for you to know, have this skill of, like, let's say, clarity. In this situation, this is why we win. In this situation, this is why we win. And you'll see just in a second why that's the case. So this motion has a huge info slide. I'm not going to read it out loud, but pause right now to check it out. But basically the gist of it is when there is a crisis and like the state has given some kind of significant financial aid to companies, you could implement this zombie voting system where the workers have two options. Either they could liquidate the company immediately and receive a lot more unemployment benefits or unemployment benefits for a longer period of time, or they could vote to not liquidate it, which then the government would inject some cash in order for them to pay out their debts and so that he can keep it afloat. And then if it were to go bankrupt, then unemployment coverage would be curtailed. This is chosen by a simple majority vote. I ended up reading it, but it's fine. Yeah, so this is the debate that we're having. And basically, what's up, Luna? I'm here. And basically, within the motion, itself there are two scenarios. Either they vote to liquidate it, or they vote to not liquidate it. So we have to give reasons and give arguments that are working within both of these scenarios and why we win. Also, a second thing that we could do is we could analyze why one scenario is more likely than another, which is something that we'll also do. But in general, this is the core idea that you should have in your head when you have this multi-scenario motion. Cool. So as in all the rest of the videos, you can pause right now, generate some ideas that you may have, and then compare to the ones that I generate. Cool. So let's move to those statements. So there are basically four general claims that are on government. The first is the principle that they have the right to, that the workers should have the right to choose in the system. Secondly, that there are many benefits to the workers if the company is liquidated. Thirdly, that workers will be comparatively more motivated if the company is not liquidated and will work for its benefit, thus increasing the productivity of the economy. And fourthly, that there is a much better system of risk sharing between the government and the company when you enact the zombie model. Yeah. So as I said, this is like a scenario-based thing. So there is a crucial piece of framing or characterization or whatever you like to call it that we must do in order to either expand all of these impacts or in general like defend against the opposition case. Because basically what op is going to run here is the workers are unlikely to make the best decision, thus this will cause a problematic this will cause problems within the wider economy and within the government's capacity to, create jobs, earn taxable revenue, and things like that. So the standard, since this is a democracy, voting, this will most likely be problematic for them. And that's a very easy path to victory for opposition to do in this debate. Which means that before we even begin analyzing these claims, we need to provide counter responses or counter characterization as to why the election will be in general good and why they will most likely vote in general in a adequate way. Obviously, we don't live in unicorn land. This doesn't mean that we can prove that all of the elections will be well done and that there will be no problems whatsoever, but we should still provide some positive analysis on this burden, which is the framing. That overall voters have good incentive to operate within this election. So there are broadly four reasons here. The first is these people are not complete idiots. They, to a certain extent, have some kind of basic understanding as to how the company functions. So if it's a manufacturing plant, they most likely worked on either the supply line, or maybe they're importing the raw materials in, or maybe they're putting the finished goods within the transportation cargo and things like that. The point is, they generally understand that this is a business and that you are creating something to sell something. They most likely themselves have some experience managing their own personal finances. They understand the concept of, for example, having debt. They understand the concept of, for example, having recurring payments. They understand the concept of not having money to pay off these things and why the business needs to be profitable to do this. So they don't necessarily, the bottom line on this reason is they don't necessarily have the worst capacity to understand this. Sure, they're probably not educated. Sure, they're probably not like super adequate, but at least they have some kind of basic understanding that there is a trade-off between the well-being of the company and their long-term well-being. The second thing is that some workers are just simply more business savvy than others. So, like, think about accountants who have financial information of the company. Think of buyers of raw materials who know whether or not prices of goods will increase or not increase. Think of new product research and development of like people who, for example, may have a new product line. Marketing also knows, for example, what are like the buyer interests and how stable their market is and things like that. These people will most likely participate within the discussion, informed opinions, and try to communicate those informed opinions as to the best of their abilities. Also, most likely these people have a vested interest for the company to survive because they are, more up the ladder in this particular case. So they have an incentive to communicate to the workers as much as possible whether or not the business is functioning and whether or not the business is able to continue doing this type of things. Also, the workers are likely to listen to these people because they understand that these are, the people with the degrees, the people with the competence, with 10 plus years in accounting of the manufacturing plant. So they're likely to, because they have a bias to authority, listen to these people. Thirdly, this doesn't have to be a super fast decision, right? Like the fact that the company is in a crisis doesn't mean that tomorrow you have to have an election and decide this particular thing. Most likely this will be something reasonable. Like for example, having it within a month or a month and a half, but in the meantime having mandated meetings, discussions, debates even, if you will, on this particular topic so people can share ideas and discuss it. And from the Infoslide, we have the benefit of the doubt that the company is not going to go bankrupt tomorrow. The company is still in a bad place, but not that there is some kind of huge urgency towards this particular issue. And finally, if this is literally the only business within the town that you are in, if this is literally the major job provider within your local municipality or something like that, like let's say a coal mine or a manufacturing plant that's there, obviously you'll not vote for taking it away or liquidating it. Like if it's the only option that you will have. Bottom line is healthy, functioning businesses who can be communicated that they will most likely continue after this crisis happens, that are experiencing some kind of problems right now, will most likely not be liquidated. Most likely you'll be able to communicate to the workers that this won't happen, and on balance this is this will be relatively good decision making. What changes though, however, and here we need to look at the other scenario. What if the business is not healthy? And this is the first argument, that you will liquidate bad businesses and workers will be able to get like some kind of benefits. So like, what are these businesses? These are businesses that most likely have some kind of structural issues with them and will most likely decline or cease to exist in the medium to long term. So think about, for example, coal factories that most likely won't exist after we have this green revolution that everyone's talking about. Products and services that are declining, that are with declining revenue, like for example, tobacco. This is because of like the new regulation that there is on smoking, that like the 18-year-olds of next year won't be able to smoke. It will be practically illegal to them. You could give many such examples. Basically, to explain it like theoretically, it's all types of businesses that can be disrupted by innovation, that have like resources that may deplete after a certain time, or that don't really have that much of a future towards them. Now, the management doesn't want to liquidate these types of businesses because they want to squeeze every last penny of this business as possible, right? Because they've already done the initial investment within this business. For example, they've built up the factory. They found the clientele that they sell to. So they want to recoup as much of their investment as possible, which means that if the business is able to, let's say, survive this crisis, but it like won't survive, let's say, the next following years, then the workers are going to be left without like a job option, or left without funding in the long term if the business fails. A question that they might ask is, okay, but why now specifically? Because the crisis has most likely shown some kind of issues, structural issues of the business, and shown that it's not sustainable. That will most likely be brought up in these discussions, be brought up in this like debates and things like that. That is asymmetric, because now like the people that are working there that have information to the data can now speak up to people who have the voting rights and can persuade for this. They can't do so with the management, because like they're the business owners. They can simply shut them off. They won't really care, and you have no actual threat power to them. Cool. So this means that this doesn't activate when businesses are good and functioning and continue to exist, but will activate for businesses that aren't necessarily the best, or have bad long-term problems with them. So what are the impacts to the workers then? The first is like they have a safety net during the crisis. So they're more like, that's by definition unemployment benefits. You get cash reserves that are super crucial to, for example, paying off your debts, or maybe investing in the down market, because like everything is down right now, that you can take this so that you can secure your future. You can also use this money to requalify yourself, like maybe do a course, learn a new skill, or maybe move to another part of the country where employment is better, or maybe another country altogether in this moment. The comparative is you get nothing, because the business will still continue to exist on their side of the house when there is no zombie voting system, but this business will in the long term decline, and your capacity to receive these benefits and plan and change your life becomes harder when, for example, you're now, instead of 30, you're 40, and like you have your kid is older, and you have to like make even more difficult trade-off decisions. So this is why it's better to liquidate these companies now and get like part of the assets that are being sold, part of the money that's being sold, and goes directly to you. So this is why the workers will be better in this scenario. And again, you can give the bottom line. This obviously won't happen in the scenario where you are the business is functioning. It will continue, but in the situations when it's not, or it's like kind of unsure, like you can use this option to liquidate and to get these savings and help yourself out. Second argument then is why the businesses that remain will function better. So this is in the scenario where the workers vote to keep the business. The business receives their cash funding from the state to pay off like their short-term debts and stabilize it. After which then the business continues operating business as usual. Haha. So basically this means that the incentives of the worker to contribute are now greater. Why? Because now they have their skin in the game, basically. Because now all of the harms of bankruptcy or all of these risks are directly put on them. This is a significant motivator for you, because this personally affects your life. This harm personally affects your life. You can, for example, picture the company going under tomorrow, and you having to, You having to be without a job and not have any unemployment benefits and things like that. So like the risk, this drastically changes your risk calculus. This means that you're more motivated to work. This means two things. Firstly, protests and unionizing and bullshit like this that are super ineffective are now less likely to happen. This means that the operations of the business work normally, because if there's a protest, then business operations stop all of a sudden. This means that, for example, unions can't go on strike and demand higher wages and things like that, and the business can continue being more profitable and more profitable and more profitable, and so stay healthy ultimately. Why is this good? Because the business can pay off their debts, expand, so go to new markets to sell their services, create new job opportunities. So in general, this would mean that the company functions better. Yes, this kind of trades off with maybe some of the rights of the workers and maybe some of their good well-being, but this obviously needs to be a balance with the company's well-being and stuff like that. But secondly, simply productivity will increase. This will lead to more production. This will lead to more ideas. This will lead to better services. Now people will actually feel like it's a significant moment for them to put in. And this may sound fluffy, but if you think about it, the fact that you're going to work every day and you are comparatively more motivated. You are comparatively staying more longer hours. You are comparatively giving more output because you realize the risks. For like a company that's, let's say, 500, 600, 1,000 people, or maybe even more, this has a significant impact on like all of these things, which means that the business bottom line will also increase. So what are the impacts? Firstly, profitable businesses simply mean GDP growth, which means that all of the social policies that the state cares about are better because now there is more taxable revenue that can be taxed, which means now you have more money to do things like fund welfare, more money to fund healthcare, more money to fund education, which means that everyone in general gets a better life. Like this is what people on the left side of the political spectrum forget, that money really doesn't grow on trees and that you actually have to expand the GDP in order to expand social services. Secondly, profitable businesses mean that they can allocate money to, for example, innovation or providing better services or products to people, or simply lowering the cost. This has a direct impact on the consumer. This is literally everything from medicine to electronics to food to all of these basic things, which means that if you're able to provide more innovative products that make your life better, or you can provide cheaper products that make people's life better, or services, because there is more competition, there is more output and things like that. This means that the average Joe lives a better life because of this. And finally, this just makes people richer. And if the company is public, like they become richer, right? The stock increases, the dividends that pay also increase, which means that a certain proportion of people, most likely the middle class, have greater purchasing power. This means that now they can spend more of this money. This means that, for example, more niches prop up, other businesses. In general, the economy is healthy. Again, we're not talking about one company. We're talking about multiple companies within the country itself. Cool. So this is the second point. Third point is the principle. I would like to say I am not a communist. I'm not running this argument. Like, jokes aside, though, what is the problem with the principle? The first and most basic thing is I don't really know how to weigh it. Like, it's not a particularly offensive claim, like in terms of pushing pushing the ballot for the team. Honestly, it's super easy to be beaten by just a op team standing up and saying, I don't think that we care so much about the rights of these people to vote as much as we care about practical outcomes to their lives and whether or not they live better lives or not. And it's hard to argue against this, right? Because the burden on the principle is to explain why it should be true, even if outcomes are in the other direction, which is a crazy high burden to meet. Secondly, it is contingent on practical outcomes, or at least it's kind of like that. Like, if you have a choice, that choice presumably leads to worse things for you. Again, it's hard to meaningfully explain why this choice is good, but if you think about the explanation of why the choice is good, so like why it's good for people to have the choice to choose to liquidate the business or not, it's solely because they can weigh off the pros and cons of the decision, but that's a practical aspect, right? Like that they have the pros in front of them. So you actually do need to explain all the things that we practically explained as like theoretical options. So basically repeating our opening if we're CG and wanting to extend, and just adding the word principle to it. Thirdly, I can't really figure out the logic of this argument. Like, do they have a right because they've worked in the company? Do they have the right because the company has received taxable revenue and things like that? But all of this logic has problems with it, because if it's the taxable revenue point, like that money that the company received before it in the times of crisis, thus the workers should have a vote in it since they pay taxes. But then shouldn't wider society also have a vote in it? Why should we stop at the workers? Or if it's like them working in it, but they haven't like bought the stocks, they haven't invested in, they haven't contributed in it. So why does that give them the right? You know, like maybe I could be biased here, but it doesn't seem particularly logical to me. And fourthly, finally, why not? Like, I just can't really deal with the response from op, which is, why not just give them the right in general? Like, if opposition asks me this question, why would you limit this to this particular scenario and thing? I honestly don't have a good answer to this, other than, this is what we're debating. And if they ask me, would you extend this right for other things? I would probably have to say, yes, we would extend it, but this is what we're debating. Hence, then the debate becomes like very blurry. So strategically, it's a bad idea to run this principle. Sometimes arguments are so bad that it's better to not run them at all. This is an example of evaluating an argument and why we shouldn't run this argument. We should let CG basically kill themselves running this argument, and live a bad life and things like that. Okay. But what can we actually run from CG? We can run the balance of risk point, which is basically goes along the lines of a country doesn't have an endless supply of money, especially in times of crisis or recession, where the GDP has decreased, so there isn't that much money that we can tax, and things like that. This means that the money that we give to this company directly trades off with other expenses. This is healthcare, this is education, this is infrastructure building, or this is direct cash payments from the government to individuals to help alleviate them from the crisis and things like that. So basically, how does the zombie voting thing help? If people choose option 1, then that means that the state can save up money because we've liquidated the company and we don't have to save it. We can use part of the liquidated assets to these people, or at least that's how the Infoslide alleviates it. Maybe I didn't get this particular part of the motion wrong, right? But in any case, the state doesn't have to give more additional money to this company. But if they choose option 2, they have a very particular cap on the terms and conditions of this. So they do give the money, but then they tell the company, look, we're not going to give you any more other than this. And this comes directly from your unemployment expenses. So it's an expense that the government doesn't have to worry about when it's making its calculations and things like that. So win-win in both of these options. Then the question might be, why is this a large sum of money? Why is this a significant proportion of the budget of the state? There are broadly 2 reasons here. The first is that this is likely to be affecting many companies when we're talking about crisis due to simply the interdependence of how the economy works. So for example, if people stop buying clothes, this starts from Nike, Adidas, and these companies, but it trickles down to the textile makers, to the transport ships that have to transport the goods and the services. So the entire economy is interdependent on different sectors, and if one thing impacts one sector, that harms the other one. But secondly, based on the Infoslide, the government will be paying this money so that the company can pay off its short to mid-term debts. These debts are likely to be a lot because usually in times of crisis, companies do a lot of short-term to mid-term borrowing in order to basically keep themselves afloat, in order to have enough cash to pay off their expenses, their taxes, and things like that. Bottom line is that this is a significant amount of capital. We've analyzed both why it's likely to be numerically a lot of companies and why it's likely to be a lot of money within each individual company. But then opposition might say to this, oh, well, can't we counterprop non-paying? Firstly, I'm not sure if you can counterprop non-paying, but here are 2 reasons as to why you can. The first is many politicians are directly lobbied by these companies. Basically, these companies directly fund their electoral campaign, and their success is directly associated with them being able to spend money on political advertisement that gets people to vote for them. Because they want to be re-elected, they make promises to these companies that they will, for example, bail them out or do these particular things. And so, the politicians have a very, very big incentive to bail out these companies. Secondly, is that this is the best possible way for politicians to get cheap political points, because they can use the save jobs narrative. They can say we saved this company and we saved this local community's jobs and things like that. Let's say 5,000 jobs in this area. This is extremely bipartisan. Both the left and the right love this. The right loves this because you're saving jobs. The left loves this because you're helping disenfranchised people in many of these cases, which means that any political party will capitalize on this. How is this comparative though? In the zombie voting system, at least in a couple of scenarios, where we're looking at scenario 1, the companies will not be bailed out because they are liquidated, because this is what the workers themselves chose. So there's a proportion of situations where this is completely asymmetric. But secondly, is that you can use the rule utilitarianism, i.e., if we give the payment to the company right now, we are going to not give them any more payments, because we've reached this agreement within the zombie voting system that we won't be inputting any more money within this. So we've put a ceiling on top of this, and it directly stops the pernicious incentive of these people. And it doesn't matter what the situation is. If you opt into option 2, this is the point to it. And that's it. Thank you. Hope you really enjoyed this motion breakdown. This was a particularly hard motion to break down due to the multiple scenarios. But like, this is a very important debate to watch because of this. And I hope this was very helpful for you. Like and subscribe. See you in the next video.